Hello and welcome. This is a video all about the tests for negative ions, and the ones we are going to look at are the carbonates, the halides and sulfates. And to start us off, we are looking at carbonates, and that's CO3 with a charge of 2 minus, and this is very easily done. We just add some dilute acid, and the ones we tend to work with are nitric acid, hydrochloric or sulfuric acid, but we just add some dilute acid to our carbonate and we should get a fizz if there is carbonate present. The fizz is the release of carbon dioxide, and we can test that simply by taking that gas and putting it through a tube through some lime water. So what we do is we have some lime water here. If we add CO2 to the lime water, which is produced by our dilute acid and carbonate test, that actually turns the lime water cloudy. It makes a precipitate, and you may remember this from previous units, but it makes a white precipitate and it makes the lime water cloudy. So this is the actual test for carbon dioxide. So if we're testing for carbonates, we just add some dilute acid. We should see some fizzing if we have carbonate present. That fizzing is actually CO2 that's being released, and that CO2 can be bubbled through some lime water, and if we get a white precipitate, then we have our carbonate. Our original solution was a carbonate. Remember, the lime water will turn cloudy. That precipitate is actually, if you remember, calcium carbonate. The next test is for our halides, and by our halides we mean chloride, bromide or iodide, and the first stage in this is to add some dilute nitric acid. We have to add the dilute nitric acid before we add the next solution, which is silver nitrate. We can't add any other acid because the other acids actually produce precipitates with silver nitrate solution. So it has to be nitric acid. So we add dilute nitric acid, then we add silver nitrate, and very simply we get a precipitate that is formed. And out of those we have three different colors. If we have a white precipitate, then we know it's going to be silver chloride, and that tells us that we have the presence of chloride ions. If we have a cream colored precipitate, that tells us that we have silver bromide, so in other words the presence of bromide ions. And finally, if we have a yellow precipitate, that then tells us that we have the presence of iodide ions. Okay, so basically for this test we add dilute nitric acid, we then add silver nitrate solution afterwards, and we look out for a precipitate, and the color of the precipitate, white, cream or yellow, will tell us whether we have chloride, bromide or iodide. The final test here that we're looking at is sulfates, and for sulfates we add dilute hydrochloric acid first. Then second step is to add what we call barium chloride solution, and all we do is we look out for a white precipitate that is formed, and if we get a white precipitate, then we know we have the presence of sulfate ions. Now the key thing to remember here is, again, this has to be hydrochloric acid. Remember not to put sulfuric acid in there, because if we did, we'd be adding sulfates to our unknown solution, and that would actually defeat the object of the test. Okay, so these are the tests for our negative ions. This one's quite straightforward. It's probably something that you know already. These ones, just remembering, it's just a question of remembering the steps for each one, and that's basically the test for negative ions. So that's me done for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon.